Hello everyone, Burger Rush here, and this is a build that is very similar to something I played in 3.16 Scourge League. Now this is a build that uses self-cursing, temporal chains and flask duration in order to keep flasks up for about 2 minutes. And then you use the Soul Thirst belt, which gives you Soul Eater during flask effect, to have Soul Eater up as long as possible through flasks for about, as I said, 2 minutes. And Soul Eater gives you attack and cast speed per stack, and when you get a couple of 100 stacks of this, when you clear a map, you get absolutely insane amounts of cast and attack speed, and therefore you can just scale so much damage off of that. So this is a Trickster Spark build that uses the same thing, but in Scourge League I played a Raider Flicker Strike, which worked really perfectly with the Scourge mechanic. But this is the new Trickster Ascendancy that has some interesting mechanics that's being used here. So now I opted to go for Spark because it is a really good clear skill and it has some really cool MTX, but also kinda makes it that you want to play the skill, and that's why I went with this. So we're gonna talk really quickly about how the build works, and we're not really gonna go over the gear too much. You're just gonna have to check that out in Path of Building yourself. Alright, as I said, this is a spin of another character that I did in Scourge League, because when I saw the new Trickster Ascendancy node one step ahead, I figured that this would be pretty doable to do again. So I looked around a little bit, and it seems like Spark is the flavor of the month here for the Trickster Selfcurse, and so I wanted to go with that as well. Also, like I said, because of the MTX. So I set up a little skill tree of my own, but it kind of looks like what other people are running, but I usually like to do my own spin-off builds and get gear that I feel like is actually obtainable in multiple leagues. So I didn't want to use any gear that is only from the Calandra mechanic, because I know some people are using Calandra mechanic rings and stuff like that, but we don't know if that mechanic is going to stay for next league, and I want to make characters that can actually be played in leagues ahead as well. So this is what I actually came up with here, the skill tree and the gear, and we're going to be going over all of that right now as well. Not all of the gear per se, but some of the most important parts that you need to know about the build. So I'm not really going to go over too much about how this works with temporal chains, but basically know this: temporal chains gives us longer duration on our flasks. We then also have flask duration, cluster jewels, and we have natural remedies and stuff like that through the impossible escape route jewel that gives us arrow dancing skill points can be allocated. This basically right here, so we can have that, and then we get as much curse effect as possible, so we can have flasks up for about 2 minutes, I would say. As you can see here, I activate my flasks and they're up forever, so we can gain a lot of Soul Eater stacks. So the one thing that you want to get is at least 2 medium cluster jewels with 6 passives, and Distilled Perfection is also really good to get. It's also better if you can get here, if you can get increased effect, so you can make the 6% into 7 or 8% as well, but that's if you have the money. It's not 100% needed, but it definitely would be a good thing to have. And then I also like this jewel here, so we can get some more flask duration down here and stuff like that. Yeah. Also, I know a lot of people are running with the Shaper boots, but I rather have a normal pair of boots, so I'm running with piercing shots here for Pierce for our Spark. And then because we are the Trickster Ascendancy, I play with Polymath and try to get a lot of different masteries as well. One really important thing for this build is that you want to get spell suppression to 100%. We are using Spellbreaker, and that's why I have Inveterate and I have the Spell Suppression Mastery, and I try to have Spell Suppression on all my gear so I hit 100%. Because it is a very big form of defense for us, so that's absolutely something you want to aim for. Another thing that you also want to have that is very important for this build is to have certain Eater of Worlds and Searing Exarch implicit modifiers as well. On the gloves, you want to get lightning exposure on hit, and also unnerve enemies is really good as well. And then on the boots, it's whatever, you can get what you want. On the armor, I opted in for increased effect of our curses, so that makes our you know, our Temple Chains curse stronger, and therefore we can have Flask up longer. Also went for Wrath R effect for damage, and then I went for Temple Chains curse effect on the head as well. And then also another big thing is to get the lab enchant there as well, 30% Temple Chains curse effect, so we have a lot of curse effects. And then you pair this with Solstice Vigil, and Temple Chains has no reservation, very nice as well. And it also gives us Shaper's Presence as well. And yeah, that's basically it for that kind of gear. Also, you want to get your resistances up as much as you can on your gear, because we're using the Annihilating Light quarterstaff. But if you only have, like me, like 49, 40 and 37%, that's not a problem. We're using Topaz, Ruby and Sapphire Flask, and then we're using a Bismuth Flask with elemental resistances during flask effects. And keep in mind, you want to craft the increased duration on all of these, and then you want to enchant increased duration as well, so you have them up for about 20 seconds each. So when I activate all of these things, I have my resistances capped, and I also take less damage from cold, fire and lightning because of the flasks. Now, one really big, very big and important thing is that chaos damage absolutely annihilates us. So you want to stay away from chaos damage as best as you can, and especially Degen Ground. I know a lot of people who play this build opt in for Leaf Shade and they opt in for Tolerance, but I feel like that's a lot of wasted points for something that you can easily maneuver if you're good at knowing how the game works and mechanics. And it's very easy to dodge when you have a lot of stacks. All you have to do is just sleep slam around and dodge those toxic balls, and whenever there's toxic ground, you just need to react and move out of the toxic ground or Degen Ground, anything like that. Just be reactive. And I've been mapping with this build for a couple of hours now. I have not died. It's very tanky, it's very easy to play, so I don't think you should be having any problems with that either. Now, another thing that I have is Survival Instinct Viridian Jewel for Flask effect duration, which is very important. I have some Grand Spectrum jewels as well, and I will be getting the Frenzy Charge one, but it's quite expensive, so I'm waiting with that. I also have Inspired Learning because I think it's really fun to have while mapping. And some other very important things for this build that you very, very much need to be very keen on having is Divergent Inspiration support for your Spark. Spark costs 28 mana. If I didn't have the Divergent Inspiration support, it would cost 54. Now, when you have a bunch of Soul Eater stacks and you're spamming Spark extremely fast, you're going to drain your mana on bosses. So it's very important to get your Spark mana cost as low as possible, and that's why I also have reduced mana cost of skills during Flask effect on one of my flasks. So my Spark only costs 6 mana when I have the flask up. And another thing is that we're using a Wrath with Divine Blessing, which makes Wrath a buff that you can use. So you click on it and then you have the buff duration for, what does it say here? Aura lasts 16 seconds. So it's not an aura that you have, it's a buff that you activate and then you have it up and it gives you damage. Also, once again here, I have Anomalous Increased Duration support because it reduces the mana cost of the skill, and I have to use Inspiration because we're reserving a lot of our mana, and casting Wrath costs a lot of mana as well. So that's why you need a Stibnite Flask, and you need Increased Duration support, Anomalous and Inspiration, stuff like that, to lower the mana cost for Wrath, so you can use it even when you're low on mana, or just use it in general. And then in my weapon, I have Smite linked with Hex Touch and Conductivity and Increased Duration. There it is. So when I walk up to an enemy, like a boss, for example, that you only need to use this for bosses, you hit him with Smite, he gets Conductivity Curse on him, and we have Whispers of Doom for multiple curses because we are using Temple Chains as well, as you know. So we hit him with Smite, he gets Conductivity. Smite also gives us a lightning damage buff, so he gets more damage. Then you want to activate Wrath, and you want to activate Vol Righteous Fire and Vol Grace if you want to do that as well. And then you just go to town. Bosses absolutely melt when you have a lot of stacks, and when you do this order or this combination, the boss is just absolutely gonna get deleted. You don't even need to do this, to be honest, but you know, it does help. And then I also have Tornado to get Arcane Surge for some more damage, and Tornado also interacts with our Spark when you cast it. So that's how I deal with bosses on this build. And One last thing that is very important to know as well is we are using the Rot Blood Promise Unset ring in order to self-curse with temporal chains. So this ring gives us, socketed gems are supported by level 20 blasphemy, so we turn the curse into an aura, and then curse auras from socketed skills also affect you, so we curse ourselves. And it's really important to have at least a 2020 temporal chains here, a 2120 or 2023 or 2123, because we want to have as a strong temporal chains as possible. Mine is only 1720 because I'm still leveling a lot of my gems. As you can see here, I have level 17 gems and all kinds of stuff like that, so my gems aren't really leveled up. But yeah, the stronger temporal chains, the longer we're going to have our flasks and all that stuff. So you want to have this at like at least 2120 or 2020 or something like that to have the strongest possible. And the Rot Blood is so good because then we can actually use normal gloves instead of using these other self-curse gloves or whatever. And that makes it really easy for us to build around the character. As I said, we don't need to use the Shaper Boots, we don't need to use any weird ass unique gloves. That just takes up a really good slot for us. We can use a normal pair of boots with high movement speed, life, suppress spell damage, resist and whatever. I also have evasion, energy shield on all my gear because that's how we base the defenses of our character. We have a lot of evasion, especially when we pop our flask as well. And then we have reduced elemental damage taken and stuff like that. And we also have quite a decent amount of energy shield. When I get my discipline up to 20 or 21, I will have about 3k energy shield and 3.3k life. So we're very tanky. I've yet to die with this build while mapping, as I said, and it's absolutely so incredible to play. And that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to drop a subscription here on YouTube and go follow me on Twitch over at twitch.tv/burgerbrush. I love you very much and have a great day. La la.